Thank you for tuning in to the finale episode of August 69. 2 years ago, when we first considered covering these events on our series, we didn't feel this series would truly be worthwhile unless we could host a discussion regarding the first victim that night on August 8th, the one of whom so little is known, and consequently, the one who is most often overlooked by historians and the public at large as a curious footnote. I'm speaking, of course, of Stephen Parent. Stephen was 18. He had just graduated from high school. He was obsessed with electronics. He had met William Garrettson, the caretaker at the Cielo Drive residence of Sharon Tate, in July of that year. On the evening of Friday, August 8th, he paid Garrettson a visit to see if he wanted to buy a clock radio. Garrettson declined. Stephen left Garrettson's guest house and was pulling out of the residence as the killers were making their way in. He was stabbed and shot to death by Tex Watson after pleading for his life from the driver's seat of his car. He wasn't wealthy. He wasn't famous. The Hollywood Hills were not his usual stomping ground. He was simply at the wrong place at the wrong time. Give or take a few additional tidbits of information, this is all we've really ever known about Stephen Parent over these past 5 decades, until now. Stephen had a steady girlfriend who was, for all intents and purposes, a constant companion for the better part of 4 years leading up to his murder. She has never before spoken publicly about her relationship with Stephen, and she was initially reluctant to take part in this interview. For that reason, we're only referring to her by her abbreviated first name, Tina.
Were you born in California? Are you a native Californian?
Yes, I was born and raised in El Monte, California. My dad's side of the family came to California in 1850. Great-great-great-grandfather moved to Southern California in the early 1880s, I believe it was.
Wow, you guys go way back.
Way back. Yeah.
Wow.
El Monte was such a small town when I was growing up that you couldn't get away with anything without my parents finding out.
Was it a close-knit community?
Fairly close, I think. We did have our Hispanic community, which had an area that actually lived on land that belonged to my family for years. In fact, their name is still on the legal description for the property that is with the Hispanic section. Yeah, it was a very small, very, very small town. My family owned a toy store. My aunt owned a toy store. My dad owned a hardware store. My uncle owned a plumbing store. The actual town of El Monte, when I was growing up, was only like 6-7 blocks. Our downtown was maybe 6 or 7 blocks. And that was about it. I know it's changed quite a bit since I've been there. Not sure for the good or the bad, but it's changed quite a bit. My dad was very prominent in politics in the town.
Oh, and what did he do?
My dad was he ran for city council a few times. He was a reserve police officer, so all of the family's friends were police officers. In fact, that's how my dad met Steve. But Steve wanted to work in my dad's campaign. We knew who Steve was from church, but never really knew Steve until my dad ran for city council. And then my dad was eventually a planning commissioner, but he lost the election by just a few votes, so the booby prize was planning commissioner.
So Steve wanted to volunteer for your father's campaign, and that's where you first met him.
That's where I first met him. He volunteered for my dad's campaign. My dad brought him home one night and said, he goes, "You guys are the same age. You guys can work together on this." And I'm like, whatever. I really had not planned on working on my dad's campaign. I'm like, Dad, I'm a freshman in high school. I got better things to do with my life. Yeah, so Steve and I worked on my dad's campaign together.
All we know about Stephen is the only thing that's really out there. He's 18 years old. He was the first victim, and he liked electronics. But what can you tell me about his personality? Who you believe that he was?
Well, before I met Steve, I know he had some minor run-ins with the police. Little kid stuff, basically. And my parents were kind of, especially my dad, kind of, let's see if we can help him out. And so he had kind of a little bit of a reputation around church. But my dad's thing was, hey, that's in the past. You can put the past behind you and change. So that's what happened. He was just, he went along with whatever I wanted. He was very easily influenced, I guess. I could get him to do whatever I wanted him to do. No matter what I said, he went along with it up to a certain point. He enjoyed being around my family a lot. Electronics is a big, big thing, and he would always do the latest cutting edge of everything, and I would get bored with that because he'd like to talk about things like that. But and he enjoyed working in politics. He's very sweet, very kind to everybody. We dated off and on 4 years. We'd have fights. We'd break up. I'd go my own way. He was always like, well, you'll be back. And I go, probably, but, but we did go to different high schools.
Yeah, he went to Arroyo, and where did you go to high school?
I went to Bishop, Vermont. It was in La Puente. It was about 12 miles away. We didn't go to school together, but sometimes, because I rode the bus home from my school, and it stopped at the grammar school I went to, and sometimes he'd be over there just to say hi to me because he got out of school at the same time, but because he was already in the town, he could come over and just to say hi to me. And when he started driving, sometimes he'd give me a ride home from the school, so I didn't have to walk. Oh, I remember too. He was also very active, as much as he could be, at the Knights of Columbus. He did a lot of activities over the Knights of Columbus, which is a Catholic men's organization.
Did you get a sense from him of what he was wanting to do with his life at that time?
He wanted to do something in electronics. Electronics was everything. I mean, he knew the latest of everything. I mean, he was a lot like my brother, who knew things about things that were coming out maybe 5 years before they actually were going to be on the market. I can remember him saying, well, one of these days they're going to be able to, like, VCRs. Yeah, you're going to be able to do this. I'm looking at them like he's crazy. And less than 4 years later, they had VCRs. So I'm like, how do you know these things? But he was just
he worked at an electronics store, didn't he?
Yes, he did. He did in senior year of high school. I don't know too much about if you read the book Helter Skelter, but it talked about him working there. But it also talked about him having a different girlfriend too, which kind of surprised the heck out of me and his family, because we were pretty much together. Other than going to school and work, we were together. I remember one of the really sweet things that he did is one of my very best friends did not have a date for our senior prom. She never dated. And I told him, I don't feel right about going and her not being able to go. We've been friends since kindergarten. He goes, I'll find her a date. And he did. He found her a date. And we doubled for the prom. And that was very sweet that he would make the effort to find somebody who was willing to actually even pay to go to a prom with a girl he didn't even know, which I thought was so sweet of them.
Yeah.
And,
was that your senior prom, or?
That was my senior prom. Actually, when his parents got his car back after everything, the senior prom pictures of my girlfriend and guy who took her were actually in Steve's car, because I had given them to him a couple of days beforehand. Said, hey, we just got these in the mail. Can you make sure, I don't know what his name is, gets his copies of the pictures? and Steve just hadn't delivered them yet, so they were still in the car. So I actually got those back. His parents gave them to me, and I gave them back to her.
It sounded like you guys were pretty constant companions all through high school.
Yeah. In the beginning, it was just like brother and sister, just good friends. And, I told him about other guys I was dating in the beginning, and he's like, okay. Didn't realize he wanted something more. He wanted something more from day one. But I'm like, I'm a freshman in high school. I'm not settling down with any one person. I'm going to have a career. That was probably one of the biggest things that we squabbled about, because he did not really want to go to college. He wanted to just get out and get his career after high school. And I kept saying, well, I'm going to college, and nothing's going to stop me from going to college. But back then, girls didn't really go to college a whole lot. My generation was just starting to be the ones that went on to college. So he's going, well, you could stay home. You don't have to go. You have a good job. You don't have to go. And I'm like, yeah, I have to go. And that was one of the things you probably thought about the most, was me wanting to go to college and him not. In fact, that's probably why we were not officially engaged. He'd asked me that summer, a few weeks beforehand, and I said, Steve, until I finish college, I don't want to, commit to anybody. I have 4 years of schooling ahead of me. I don't want to do this to somebody. I want to be able to enjoy college. I was 17 at the time, and I did not see myself getting married at the age of 17 or 18. So
I completely understand. Yeah. Forgive me if I've got the timeline wrong, but was he at all concerned about the draft?
You know what? I don't think we ever talked about it. I think it was kind of like, if it happens, it happens. We had just graduated from high school in June. I don't know if there was even the lottery back then yet. I can't remember when they started the lottery or not, but we never talked about it. I think it was more like, if you don't talk about it, it won't happen. One thing I do remember about Steve is, while we were just in the just friend stage, I did lose a friend that I was dating in Vietnam. He was still in Vietnam, and Steve was pretty much the first person I called when I found out, and he was right there for me, to cry on his shoulder and all that. But that was the friend stage. Who knew? I'm like, God, when I think back about some of the things that happened in my life, I'm like, oh my God, I'm surprised I'm as sane as I am today. After losing my friend in Vietnam and then losing Steve less than 2 years later, it was something else. It was a strange time. We did a lot of going to movies. We didn't go to the beach much because we were both very fair-skinned and sunburned, so we didn't do that much. But he worked a lot. In high school, like our senior year, when things started getting more serious, I went to work right from school. Basically, my school bus would drop me off where I worked at because it was on the route, and then I go home and he'd come over. I get off work at 6, and he'd probably be at my house by 6:30, and usually stay until like 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, and then go home. And that was during the week. We really didn't go out. We did studying, and school was not a big thing to him. So he'd kind of get tired of watching me study, and I got to go to the library. So we go to the library together, and he'd get bored, but he'd do whatever I wanted. Like I said, he did whatever I wanted. I controlled everything. A few weeks before this happened, before he was killed, we had actually been out for a drive one evening, and we were up in that area. We were just drove into Hollywood, so we, walk around Hollywood Boulevard and everything, and then so we thought, well, I didn't have a curfew, so my dad found other ways to punish me. If I stayed out late, he'd get me up super early. And that was his thing. I'm not going to give you a curfew, but watch out. I'll know if you came in late. I'll get you up at 5 in the morning. If you came in at 3, trust me. He was good at that. No, so, but we were, like I said, we were driving around L.A. and up in Hollywood, and we actually got lost. And I said, Steve, do you know where we're at? He goes, I've never been up here before. And I said, I've never been up here before either. How do we get home? And he goes, I don't know. And we wound up going up and down a lot of little side streets in that area. And I kept saying, are you sure you've never been here? He goes, no. And I'm like, oh, and I'm looking at the clock, and I'm like, okay, I may not have a curfew, but my dad's going to kill me when I get home. I'm not even going to get to go to bed by the time I get home. And he was very adamant. He did not know anybody up here. And then later, that was one of the things I was asked when the police interviewed me is, who did we know who lived up there? And I'm like, we knew nobody. So I don't know how many times after that he may have been up there. I did not know about him meeting the caretaker. I'm not sure why, because usually he told me everything. As far as I know, he told me everything. He's very, very close to one of the priests in our parish, Father Robert Burns. I don't know if you ever heard about him.
Yes, yes.
If Steve wasn't with me, as Mom told me later, well, if Steve's not with you, I knew he was with Father Burns. And I go, yeah, they were very, very, very close. There were times when the three of us would hang out and stuff even. They were very close. And Father Burns was a family friend of my family's. And I know he'd tell my parents how happy he was that Steve and I were together. You know, he was rooting for us. I don't think
was faith important to him or the church?
I was just going to say that I don't know if that was the important part or if it's just the friendship he had with his father, or if maybe he was trying to find his faith. I think a lot of him going to church was mainly because I went to church. So, you know, as far as, well, if she does it, I'm going to go. And I'm not sure how he got to know him so well. Like I said, he went to public schools. Those of us who went to Catholic school, we saw Father Burns pretty much on a daily basis over at the school. But I don't know. So I'm not sure how they got together. Maybe through the Knights of Columbus. Because the Knights of Columbus had a fish fry every Friday night. But I'm not sure. But I just know that they had a really close friendship. I don't know.
Well, and Father Burns, wasn't he the one that ultimately identified Stephen?
Yes, he was the one who identified him. My father, who had worked for that mortuary, went over to the mortuary and actually saw Steve once he got brought back to the mortuary in our town, and actually saw Steve. And my dad was the one who said, well, you don't want to see him. You don't want to see him. But he goes, I had to see him so that I could assure you it was him. You know, My dad, I had a phenomenal dad, and he was just amazing father. But yeah, Father Burns was the one who ID'd him. My last memory of Steve was not pleasant at all. Cost me a lot of guilt. Even to this day, I have to remember it, and it's a hard thing that happened. As I said, we just got out of high school, and I had a younger brother and sister, and my brother and sister have been begging me since I had a car. I had a station wagon. My uncle was in Vietnam, so he let me use his station wagon while he was in Vietnam. And they've been begging me, could I please take them to drive-in? And I kept saying, oh, no, not tonight. Steve's coming over. So finally I said, tomorrow night, you guys, I'll take you. No matter what, I will take you. And my brother's best friend, he and I had another cool friendship, very joking and everything. And Steve was jealous of this friendship. And I'd always say, oh, Tony, he's too young for me. Not a big deal. So Steve came over that night. I believe it was a Wednesday night, I believe. And he said, let's go out. I said, no, I promised the kids I'll take them to the movies tonight. And he goes, no, I don't want you going. I said, no, I promised them. And he goes, well, I don't like you going out with Tony. I said, I'm not going out with Tony. I'm going out with my brother, Tony, my sister, Judy, and Tony's little brother. I said, they're just kids. And he goes, I don't want you to go. And he goes, and he got really mad and, he started screaming at me for some reason. I don't know what set him off. And I just said, I'm doing what I want. And then he called me a bitch. Nobody calls me a bitch. He gets away with it. And I turned around and slapped him, and I walked out the door. That's the last time I ever saw him.
Oh.
That was, so that's the last memory I have of me slapping him and walking out the door. So I didn't hear from him on Thursday. And I thought, well, probably a good thing because we're both trying to cool off. Because I was still very angry. And then Friday, I had gone to the store. And actually, I remember very clearly I went to Sears with my brother and a couple of his friends again because they wanted to buy something. And I took them to the store, and at that time, Steve came over to apologize to me, going to my brother. And my brother goes, Steve, they go, Tina is still really mad at you. I think you need to give her a couple more days because what you did was wrong. And like, Steve, yeah, I know, but then he goes, but you know what? You need to give Tina a couple more days to cool off because right now would not be the night to see her. And then apparently they hung out for a while. Steve asked my brother if he wanted to go with him to sell some electronic equipment to somebody he had met recently, and they were going to go up to Beverly Hills. And my brother said, yeah, I'll go. And then he goes, well, wait a minute, Steve. I'm waiting for a phone call. I'm supposed to go deep sea fishing in the morning. I need to find out what time we're leaving. So then my brother got the phone call and said, oh, Steve, we're leaving really early. I'm not going to be able to go with you tonight. So Steve said, well, tell Tina I came by and I'll talk to her later. And he left. I got home probably 10 minutes later, and my brother said Steve was here, but I told him he was still pretty angry and to give you a couple of days. And he said he'd give you a call later. And then my brother told me that he was supposed to go, but he goes, yeah, I didn't go because I'm have to get up early for sea fishing. So, I went on to bed, didn't think more about it. I got up the next morning and went to work. I believe I got off work about 1 o'clock that Saturday. And my mother was in Costa Rica with my oldest sister, who had just given birth, and she lived down there. So my dad decided to take myself and my two younger siblings out for the day, just doing fun stuff. And this is what bothered me later, how this hearing it on the news bothered me. I remember we were going to Seaport Village, and they started talking about this massacre in Beverly Hills, and 5 bodies were found, and all the blood, and all day long it just kept on me like, wow, that's really horrible. And I'm like, well, why is this bothering me? You hear about this kind of stuff all the time. Why is this bothering me so much? And it just did. And then that was Saturday. And I still didn't hear from Steve on Saturday night. I thought, okay, he's giving me a couple more days. I thought, I'll call him tomorrow and tell him everything's good. So then we went to church. And on Sunday morning, and they would always go, please pray for the dead of the parish. And they said, Stephen Parent. And I looked at my dad, and I said, no, that can't be right. And my dad goes, no. So after Mass, he sent my brother back to talk to the priest. I can't remember if it was Father Burns or not. I don't think so. And then my very best friend, the one who got to the prom with me, she sold the newspapers after Mass to all the people who went to Mass. She'd been doing it for years. And she came, standing there, she came up to me and she goes, Tina, I'm so sorry to hear about Steve. She'd been looking at the newspaper and everything else. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And she goes, Steve's dead. And just then my brother comes up and whispers something to my dad. And then my dad goes, it is Steve. And I went, no. And then my girlfriend, she says, and they're holding the caretaker for murder. And I said, and then she goes, William Garretson. Well, Steve's very best friend's name was William Garrison, who I had known since first grade. And I go, caretaker, William Garrison. I said, his parents don't have a caretaker. And I'm trying, all these thoughts are going through my mind. I remember all this. And I'm like, what are you talking about? They're holding Billy? And she goes, no, William Garretson. I said, wait a minute. Steve died in his car, right? He had a car accident, right? Where's this caretaker thing coming in? She's going, you don't know anything, do you? And I'm like, no, I don't. What's going on? So then she told me what she read in the newspapers that day. She told me and my dad and everything. And we left church. So then we left, and we went out to breakfast, and my dad's trying, he's calling the police department, local police department, because my dad was on the force. And his best friend, who was chief of police, actually would have been my legal guardian at one point if my parents had died when we were younger. And he's not getting any information. So my dad goes, let's go away for the day, just to kind of, I guess it was just to get my mind off of it, not that it did at that point. So we went away all day long, and we got home probably about 6 o'clock in the evening. And my dad called LAPD at this point and said, I think you guys want to talk to my daughter. My daughter was Steve's girlfriend. You may want to talk to her. And they go, yeah, okay. And they took my name and number, and that was it. The next day, his mom called me at work, and she said, I know you know by now Steve's dead. I said, yes, I do. I said, because I kept going to work because I don't think I wanted to accept it yet. I go, I want to come over there. And she goes, I'm not sure I want you here. I want you to come over here and face what we're facing right now. There's reporters everywhere.
Mm.
And I was like, oh. So then my other very best friend was on vacation in New York, and she called me and she said, listen, I already called and talked to her boyfriend, Marty, and she said, Marty's going to pick you up from work, and he'll take you over to Steve's house. He will not leave your side. He'll be there as long as necessary. So then I called his mom back, and she said, well, when you get here, pull straight into the very back and come in the side door. Because like I said, there's reporters everywhere. So we got there, and, reporters were everywhere. And we went in the house. We got in his house, and we were in there. And, everybody's just sitting around. Younger brothers are out in the front yard playing. And his mom goes, they need to come in now. It's getting late. I said, well, I'll go get him. So I went out to the front yard, and immediately all I could hear was, that's her. That's the girlfriend. That's the girlfriend. Get a picture. Get a statement. And, people are coming up to me, and I'm like, just get away. That really turned me off about reporters. So I got his siblings inside with the house, and we sat, and I went, oh, man. And so then my friend Marty goes, well, let's go home. So we left, and we started being followed by some reporters. So we zigzagged our way back home, and finally, we got home. We lost the reporters because it was a town I grew up in. So we knew all the ins and outs. But then, of course, there was the same thing with the funeral and all that, and that was full of reporters and everything. The family had asked me to sit with them, with the family at the services, and I said no, I wanted to stay with my dad. I sat with my dad, and I remember somebody getting really upset with me about because I didn't wear black. Somebody in his family got really and confronted me. And I said, you didn't know Steve at all. And they go, what do you mean? I go, the last thing Steve would have wanted me in was black. That was not Steve. Steve would have wanted bright colors. And his mom goes, she's right. He would have preferred her a brighter color than black. I remember that.
Yeah.
I was like, whoa. It was just some of the things. It's funny how some things you remember very clearly and some things kind of fade away. We still hadn't heard anything from the police. We had no idea what it was, what was going on. And then I remember that we had the rosary one night, and the next day was the funeral. I remember all the paparazzi or whatever at the cemetery. After that, we went back to his parents' house. And I was going over there pretty much every day for a while. And the first week, one other night I left their house, and I was followed again. So this time I went to my best friend's house, and I called my dad. I said, Dad, I'm not coming home tonight. I said, I was followed again. I said, can you bring me clothes for work for tomorrow so I can change to go to work? I said, because I don't want them to know where we live. And then we found out the reporters have been trying to get our address, but because of my dad's connection to the police department, it was all blocked. 3 or 4 weeks later, I don't remember the timeline for sure, I was at his parents' house, and his mom goes, I need to show you a letter that he wrote to his grandmother 2 weeks before this happened. And I went, okay. She said, we just got it in the mail from the grandmother. And it was a type of letter that you would write somebody if you knew you were going to die, about how his life was so perfect then and how he'd met the perfect girlfriend and he was hoping to marry her, and we'd have little redheaded babies because we both redheads. And it was just a very moving letter, but I said, it just sounds like the kind of thing you would write if you knew you were dying, about how your life would end. And his mom goes, yeah, that's how I felt. She says, did he have a premonition? I said, I don't know. And at that point, I had still not been called by the police. I want to say it's probably like the third week of August, maybe. We had gone up to San Francisco for the weekend, and the police actually went out to El Monte PD and said they wanted what they could about me. I was a person of interest in a murder investigation, and they wanted to know if I had a record, anything else. And they got the chief of police took over. He heard them talking about this, and he said, "Listen, I've known her since all her life. No, she does not have any kind of a record." And they want to know where I was, if he knew where I was. And he goes, "Yes, I know where she's at, and I will let them know when they get back in town to get hold of you." So they gave the chief my phone number, their phone number. And when we got home, my dad tried calling us again. So no response. They didn't bother to come back. And then it was just before I started college, probably the week before college, it'd be the last week of August. We got a phone call from LAPD. Could they come out and talk to me? And they came out to talk to me, and I wasn't 18 yet, so one of my parents had to be in the room with me. And so finally, I just told them, I said, "Listen, I'm going to be 18 in a couple of days. Get my mom out of here because my mom was just a pain, and there's some things my mom didn't need to know. If they were asking questions like, what did we do on dates? How intimate were we? Was I positive we didn't know anybody up there?" They talked to me for about an hour and a half, just going over and over. Basically, I don't know, try to trip me up. How did Steve know this guy? Why wasn't I with them? Just over and over and over, which I learned later was a technique. They finally left, and we didn't hear anything else about it. The hard part was I started college the following week, and I was a criminal justice major. I'd already decided on that before all this happened. That was one of the other bones of contention between Steve and I because, going into law enforcement is not for women, and it's dangerous, and, he and my mom were in agreement on that one. So that was rough. But starting school was very rough because pretty much every one of my criminal justice courses centered around this murder and the investigations, and it was being brought up every day in class. So I had to finally go to my instructors, and I told them, I said, that I was part of this. Oh, and actually, I forgot about this part. We had to do a background questionnaire before we could get into the program. And the question was, have you ever been interviewed regarding a major crime? And but yes. And so then, then we started class. My background had not come back yet. So I told my instructors, I said, I just want you to know there might be times where I might have to get up and walk out of class because I can't handle it because this affected me. And I told them the story, and they went, oh, okay. After this all happened, I did not sleep alone for probably a good month to 6 weeks. Somebody else had to be in the room with me in my bedroom, and I had to have a light on. And then finally, I got to where I could sleep in the room alone, but probably for another 2 months, I still slept with the light on. Every time I hear the noise outside, now I had an upstairs bedroom, but every time I hear the footsteps at night, it would sound like footsteps, I would panic and, wake up, and that'd be sleep for me for the night. What my biggest thing is the police still had his wallet, which we didn't know. They just said, his parents had asked for his wallet back, and they said, no, we don't have it. We did not know they had it still. But my thing was, okay, if his wallet's gone, was my address in there? That was the biggest thing. I kept telling my dad, I think they might have our address. But of course, looking back, I'm thinking, why would he have my address? He knew where I lived. But the things that go through your mind doing all of this.
Sure.
And then I remember, I think it was in December. It's when they first broke open the case, and I remember coming home from school, getting ready to go to work, and my mom says, you might want to sit down. And I go, what? And she goes, well, they've arrested people. I was like, really? And she goes, yeah. And then, of course, I immediately, had to go to the newspaper and read it and all that. And then I used to actually for the longest time, I kept a scrapbook of everything. But eventually I thought, as long as I have a scrapbook, I'm not going to move on with my life. I'm just too obsessed with it. Now, the interesting thing is one of my classmates happened to be an El Monte police officer. And he told me, he says, I was the one who notified Steve's parents. And he knew about my involvement. He said, this is what, he says, I feel horrible about the way it happened. I said, why? And he goes, well, I was given a card with they gave me a card, and he says, they told me to go over to his family's house and give this to them and tell them to call this number. He said, so I did. He said, I did not flip the card over. I didn't look at it. All I had was this phone number. He said, so when I got over there, I told the family, I said, I'm here about your son, Stephen. You need to call this number to get more information. And he says, and then as I handed them the card, I realized I knew that number. But at that point, his dad had already called it, and they answered L.A. County Coroner's Office. And he goes, had I known, I would have handled that so much differently. He says, that's bothered me for a while. He says, I should have handled that differently, but I didn't. Now, his mother told me later the things that I didn't know about from the time, He was murdered till I saw her again on Sunday. Apparently, Steve had come home from work on Friday for lunch, and then told his mom and dad, his mom, well, I'm going out. I'm not going to be here for dinner. And then he didn't come home Friday night. Well, they were angry, but they also had told him, said, well, you know what? He thinks he's so independent, he can be on his own. And they were really angry with him for not coming home. And they said, wait till he gets home, or we're going to, lay down the law. He's going to be 18. He's going to, he's going to have to either follow some rules or he be out, and we're going to kick him out. So he didn't come home all day Saturday, not knowing that he was dead. And then Saturday evening, his dad goes, why don't we go over and get some dinner over at the Knights of Columbus Hall? Just a few blocks from where they live. So they had his sister, who I want to say was probably 15, maybe years old, and babysit the younger siblings. And she said, they said, we'll be back in a couple hours. Well, while they were at dinner, some reporters came and knocked on their door. She let them in. Janet let them in. And to this day, I don't know why she let them come all the way in the house. I don't know. But back then, I don't think everybody was quite as protective as they are now. And they said, well, we have reports that your brother's car was stolen. Is this where Steve's parent lives? And she's going, yeah. And then they saw my high school prom picture sitting on top of a TV or something. They go, oh, is this your brother Steve? And she said, yes, that's Steve and his girlfriend at the prom. And they took photos of that picture. And then all of a sudden something clicked. And she goes, something's not right here. So she called the Knights of Columbus Hall and asked for them to get her dad on the phone. And she told him, Dad, you need to come home. There's some reporters say there's something going on. Something's not right. They said Steve's car's been stolen. So he and his wife came right home. I don't know if they talked to the reporters, if they had left by that point, but it was shortly thereafter the El Monte PD officer showed up at the door, and that's when they called the coroner's office. Their immediate thing after all this was they called Father Byrne. Mm-hmm. Father Byrne wasn't in because Father Byrne had the premonition that something had happened to Steve. He was already on his way down to coroner's office. He just knew something had happened to him. So he was already on his way there. So the way they learned about this is pretty horrible.
Yeah.
It was not the way it was portrayed in the book Helter Skelter. Not a lot of stuff. His mom and I talked about this later because in the book Helter Skelter it talks about this other girlfriend that Steve had and how he spent all this time with her. And his mom and I laughed and said, hey, if he had another girlfriend, he could find time for another girlfriend besides all the time he spent with me. More power to him. Because I don't know how he did it. Because he was with me until bedtime every night. I did not go to any of the trials. I did not, I just couldn't handle it anymore. I didn't think too much about it till the book came out. I mean, I always thought about it. August is always a rough month for me, just because of this. A lot of my friends from high school, I kind of lost touch with them because they didn't understand my grief. I missed a couple weddings that happened right after this because I was not in a position to go to a wedding. In fact, one of the girls I just talked to last week for the first time because I missed her wedding. And she called me last week. And it was kind of nice. My ex-husband, he was a deputy sheriff in L.A. When I told him the story and everything, he goes, when I was working at the jail, Charles Manson was one of our inmates before the big murder. He said, I don't remember what he was in for. He goes, but even then, the deputies were scared to death of him. Nobody would move him by themselves. They always had at least 2 to 3 deputies moving him. He said something about his eyes was so piercing. He said it was a very scary person just to talk to him, to look at him. So that was kind of, interesting. Even back then, he was kind of scary.
You said earlier that for a time, you kept a scrapbook, but then you thought to yourself, I need to move on. How long did it take you to finally find the strength to move on?
Probably about 4 or 5 years. I mean, I got rid of it just before I got married. I got married in 1973. And I threw it away as I was packing to get married. As I was moving into my husband's house, and I'm like, okay, do I take this and keep this memory with me, or do I finally just get rid of it? And so I did get rid of it. And I actually thought I had put a lot of it behind me until I'll never forget it. It was 1977. I was at the mall in Arcadia, California. I was walking through a bookstore. I had my daughter with me. She was only a couple months old. I passed the bookstore, and the Helter Skelter was there, the book that I didn't even know about. So I said, oh, I need to look at this. And my ex-husband had this thing about me buying hardback books. But I picked it up, and I opened the book, and the first page that it opened to was my senior prom picture. And I had no idea it was in there. So I said, I got to buy this book. And I get home, and I have this hardback, and my husband goes, you don't need to buy hardback. This is way too expensive. You couldn't wait for the paperback. And I'm like, let me show you why. And he goes, oh, my God. He said, and then, of course, we discussed how they had the right to use my picture without my permission. So I immediately called my brother, who worked at a law school, and I said, how can they use my picture without my permission? He said, and he told me all the copyright laws and all the other stuff, and I went, oh, okay, I guess there's nothing I can do about it. So when that book came out, and I did not see it until 1977, that brought phone calls from friends and family again. People go, I was actually somewhere, I don't remember where it was, somebody goes, you look like somebody who was in the book Helter Skelter. Have you read that book? This is like 1978, 1979. I'm like, yeah, that was me. I said, in fact, I have the original picture hanging on my wall still in my hall. I saw it just yesterday, but I still, and my current husband, he knows all about it, and he has no problem saying, he doesn't say you need to take this down or anything else. I mean, he knew that was a part of my past, and, it changed me. But, when I look back over the years, I don't know if Steve and I ever would have really gotten married. I think we might have, with me going to college and him doing what he wanted, I think we may have stayed friends, but I don't think we ever would have gotten married. But I don't know. Maybe we would have. And if we did, I don't know to say if we would have stayed together. Because when we fought, we did have some good fights. He was a very polite young man. He never tried to force himself on me. He was very timid when it came to making out and stuff. It was, my other girlfriends would be making out. He'd go, I don't know why they're doing that, and things like that. Oh, one of the funny things about Steve, when we went to the prom, Steve forgot his wallet the night of the prom. He went to pay for something. He goes, I don't have my wallet with me. I was so mad at him. I'm like, well, I let him stress it out for a few minutes, and he was really stressing. And my girlfriend's nudging me. She goes, you got to stop. Because she had seen me. Before we left, my dad had given me like $40. He goes, you never know. You might need some money. So finally, after Steve stressed for a little while, I said, here, I got it. And he was so embarrassed. He goes, don't you worry, I'm going to pay you back. I said, actually, we have to pay my dad back. I said, because my dad just knew, something would go wrong. That was actually the first time my dad let me stay out all night. Was after the prom. We went out, and we went to the original McDonald's.
Oh, wow.
For breakfast. Well, breakfast. for a soda or something, I think we went to, because they went open for breakfast then. But we stayed out all night. It's the only time my dad never got mad at me for the prom. And we went to, after the prom, we went to a place in Hollywood, Beverly Hills, called, I want to say it was called the Islander. It was a really fancy restaurant at the time, very pricey. We were with three other couples, and everybody chipped in together to cover our bill. I still have my prom dress from that night.
You mentioned that every August is difficult for you, and we're talking on the 7th of August, and this 50th anniversary is coming up, tomorrow. So
right.
what does this evoke in you this time?
It's hard. It took me a while to even I thought of that when I agreed to do this, and I thought, well, if I'm going to do it, let's do it on the 50th. It's a sad time. I think back about what could have been. Every year on the 8th of August, I always think about it. It's like, it's a piece of my life. My life changed forever that day. Even now, I don't cry about it, but I have a sense of sadness, a sense of loss as to what it could have been. I've had a great life. I have a phenomenal husband, 2 phenomenal kids, amazing grandkids. I don't know if I would have had that if Steve lived. I don't know what kind of life we would have had, but it's still something you always wonder every day, every year. Every August I think about things like that. You think back, and like I said, there's all those what ifs. I'd done this. What if I had done that? Little things like I saw the movie Once Upon a Time in Hollywood the other day, and my son didn't tell me what it was about. It was kind of like, okay, I was so tense in my seat at the movies when they showed up there and getting ready to go up the driveway. And all I could think was, oh, my God, they're going to show Steve coming down. They're going to show this. And I didn't know what I would do, how I was going to take that. And then, of course, the whole thing shifted. I was like, oh.
Yeah.
I was able to take a breath. I mean, there have been some other made-for-TV movies about the whole thing, and I've seen some of them, and they're so made up. They're so Hollywood, and nothing real factual. I mean, a little bit of fact in it, but not a lot. And at times it makes me so angry. I'm like, why don't you tell the truth? Why don't you talk about what really happened? And
did you ever go up there? I mean, did you ever have a need to see where it happened?
No, I've never. And in fact, that's something my husband asked me that the other day when after we left the movie. She says, "So is that the way it was?" And I said, "Well, I've never been there. All I've done is seen it in pictures. I've never been up there." But it was kind of interesting because my husband asked me that, if it would look, that's how it looked. And I said, I don't know.
Well, I'm wondering how you feel when you see things like the paroles coming up for the killers.
Oh, I follow those closely. There's a part of me who feels like, especially I've been in law enforcement for years and stuff, maybe they, after this many years, maybe they have been rehabilitated. They unfortunately made some very bad choices in life. My motto is everybody makes a choice in life, sometimes good, sometimes bad. Unfortunately, you have to live with the consequences. I think at this point, they've been in almost 50 years in prison. If they're still, there's a couple of them still alive, but I don't think any of them would. I think there's a couple that are still very staunch believers in it, but I don't think. I think Leslie Van Houten, I think she just was. She was very brainwashed and everything else, and I don't think she was as staunch of a person in this thing as others were.
Yeah,
I don't know.
It's interesting. I interviewed one of the jurors that is still living. Uh-huh. He was 24 when he served on the jury, and he said they had the hardest time coming up with an appropriate sentence for Van Houten because the evidence showed that she stabbed Rosemary after her death. And so they said, well, what do we sentence her with? But they came to the conclusion that she didn't know that she was dead at the time, so her intent was to kill. But at the same time, he said, I would release her today if it were up to me.
Yeah.
The juror that sentenced her in the first place.
I mean, Kernwinkle, I know one just died. I think Atkins died recently, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I quit following it kind of, when they die, I'm like, okay.
And Tex Watson, who is the, for all intents and purposes, he is the murderer. I mean, he is the one that...
Right, yes. He's the one that
Steve.
pulled the trigger. He's the one that actually killed Steve.
Do you think about what you would want to say to Steve if you were ever able to see him again?
I would apologize to him for slapping him. I know that. That would be the first thing. That's probably the biggest regret I have. I don't think a lot of this would have affected me as deeply if I hadn't left in such anger that day. I think maybe I might have handled things a little bit better. I don't know. But I know the first thing I would do is say, I am so sorry for slapping you. And I'm so sorry for not being there when you came by to apologize to me. For the longest time, I blamed myself, like, well, if I had been home that night, maybe he wouldn't have gone. Or if I had gone with him, maybe we wouldn't have left at that exact moment. Maybe we would have left 10 minutes earlier.